Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC. We cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Orman.
That's right. Welcome into the Corner 3 podcast. I am your host, Austin Orman. As always, thanks for being along for the ride here during the show. Coming at you live on Friday nights. Well, not live, at least that's when the episodes drop. I'm recording this one ahead of time. If you're listening to this, I'm just wrapping up out at Haymarket Park for BP with DP. If you are a ticket listener, you know that means that we take some swings with the Lincoln Salt Dogs ahead of their games. Sure, we had a blast with that. Looking forward to getting in the batter's box maybe a little bit here today. But this is coming at you post BP with DP, but it is coming to you pre-Big Ten Media Days. I'll be heading out there next week. So be on the lookout for some news regarding an episode next Friday, leaving Monday, getting back Thursday. So won't promise an episode next week, but I will do everything in my power to get one prepped so I can knock an episode out for you guys on July the 25th. We are getting closer and closer and closer to college basketball season. Every week that passes, we get more news in college basketball, more players getting some news on the eligibility front. Heard from some Nebraska players, not on eligibility, but heard from Price Sanford and Kendall Blue earlier in the week. Obviously, individual and team drills going on right now across college basketball. So there's lots to get to. I think we had a really fun time last year with the conference previews, both looking at the teams and the players. I'm sure that's going to get started here pretty soon. Got to start putting boots on the ground. Got to start digging into that sort of content here coming up. But for today, more laid back, more chill episode. Not sure how long this one's going to go. We'll go until we run out of stuff to talk about here. But the purpose of this episode is going to be a remember him. Remember them, remember that dude. Yeah, he was pretty darn good. So I'm going to pull up the text that I sent to a couple of guys who featured on this show in the past. A couple of my favorites, a couple of your favorites. Jacob Bigelow and Wilson Moore. Those guys were gracious enough to take a question from me and come back with an answer. So the question was, guys, can you fill out a lineup of 5 college basketball players you remember growing up who you think are criminally underrated or under-discussed? So I will give you my starting lineup of guys and 3 other ones that I think meet that qualification. And then we got starting lineups from both Jacob Bigelow and Wilson Moore. Bunch of flavor, bunch of guys in here that you definitely know the names if you're listening to this podcast, but I'm sure you haven't thought of them in that long. I will say, I think my team probably takes the cake for, oh yeah, remember him more so than these other guys in Jacob and Wilson, but that's neither here nor there. We'll get into the teams, and I continue to forget that I can share my screen with you, so you can follow along with what I'm doing. We're going to have a little bit of behind basketball, inside baseball, whatever it is you want to call it here on this episode, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'll minimize me a little bit, so that what we're doing here is showing you the same stats that I'm looking at courtesy of Sports Reference. I use them for so much. Really appreciate what StatHead does for guys like me, looking at stats, looking up numbers. But this way you can see the exact stats I'm looking at. You can call my bluff if I miss something or get something wrong. You can point something out if I miss it. But let's get into my team of criminally underrated or under-discussed players. The first one that came to mind for me, again, trying to build out a lineup, was Kevin Pangos. I hope you've heard of that name because the dude was a stud. You see his numbers right here at Gonzaga, 4-year guy, 142 games, just shy of 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. Only 43% field goal shooter, but 42% from 3, 84% from the free throw line. You see his honors up here at the top of the page. West Coast Conference Player of the Year in 2014-15, all freshman guy, 2-time all West Coast Conference Tournament team, Rookie of the Year, Freshman of the Year in 11-12. And of course, here's the big one, 4-time all conference player for Mark Few at Gonzaga. As we scroll down here and we look at his stats, he only came off the bench in 2 games as a freshman, Otherwise, he was a starter for every game the Zags played for the 4 years that he was on campus. You can see his progression: 9 shots, 9 shots, 10 shots, 8 shots. Volume, but not super high. 3-point volume over here played pretty steady. Decreased a little bit from 6 as a freshman down to just shy of 5. But look at those percentages: 40%, 41.7, 41.2, and 43% as a senior. Average double-digit points every year. You saw his playmaking improve in terms of assists and assist-to-turnover ratio. Kevin Pangos was a stud. So why is it that I think he's underrated and under-discussed? Well, friends, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these Gonzaga teams that he played on. The 2011-12, oh, that's the wrong one. See, this is that inside baseball stuff that you don't always see. So 2012 Gonzaga, when he was a freshman, got bounced in the second round of the tournament, lost to a really good Ohio State team. Who else was on that team? Elias Harris, Robert Sacre, and David Stockton, who is another guy that might be slightly under-discussed. But then we keep looking at these Gonzaga teams that Kevin Pangos played on. Second round loss, again, they'll call it third round, but of course they mean the round of 32. To that number 9 seed Wichita State team, who I promise you will feature coming up here pretty quickly. 2013-14, again, round of 32 loss to Arizona after earning an 8 seed. And then Kevin Pangos' senior year, that 2014-2015 team was loaded. Kyle Wiltjer had one of his best years in college. You get Pangos there, you get Przmek Karnowski, Domantas Sabonis was there as a freshman. You just go up and down the list of names that played a role. That Gonzaga team only lost twice in the regular season, by 1 possession to Arizona and then by 1 possession to BYU in the last game of the regular season. Rolled through the West Coast Conference tournament. They win that. Win their 2 opening weekend games by 10 points over North Dakota State, by 19 points over Iowa. They beat UCLA by 12 in the Sweet 16, and then they ran into eventual national champion Duke, where they lost 66-52. So not a whole lot of tournament success for Kevin Pangos. Won a game every year in the tournament, topped out in the Elite Eight, but that's the only time he made it past that round of 32. But when you think of these Gonzaga teams, right, and what's happened since Kevin Pangos, you think of the posts more so than you think of the guards, right? You think about your Kyle Wiltjer, who was insane as a junior. You think about Karnowski, the mountain of a man, 7'1", 290. You think about Domantas Sabonis there at Gonzaga. I mean, let's just scroll through some of these Gonzaga teams that happened after Pangos left, right? So that next year, you have senior Kyle Wiltjer and sophomore Domantas Sabonis. I mean, those guys averaged, 38 points and like 18 rebounds between them. That's pretty insane. You keep moving on down the list. That 2017-18 Gonzaga team, you get Nigel Williams-Goss, you get Jonathan Williams, Zach Collins comes in, Killian Tilly from overseas, Rui Hachimura. Gonzaga hadn't reached this level of success, right? Here's the other important part. Lost the national final. Finally broke through to the Final Four. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong tab because I opened it up. Let me see if I can potentially share my screen. Actually, I'll just get there from the Kevin Pangos page. If we go to the Gonzaga 2016-2017 team, see, this is why we work these kinks out ahead of time. Let me get there to 2016-17 Gonzaga that ends up playing for a title, right? They lost in the Sweet 16 to that Syracuse team that made a run in the 2016 season. Gonzaga comes back with a vengeance, 37-2. 1 loss in West Coast Conference play, and then they lost the final game of the year by a couple possessions to North Carolina. But that's why I think Kevin Pangos maybe goes a little under the radar, is because, again, for a 4-time All-West Coast Conference player, you don't think about him because of the posts that came after, and I think because of Gonzaga's team success after he left. I mean, make the national championship game, lose in the Sweet 16 to a Florida State team the year after that, run the table in the West Coast Conference, make it to the Elite Eight again. That was the high water mark for Kevin Pangos, right? But not for Gonzaga, who makes it again to the national final in the 2021 season. Gonzaga was good with Kevin Pangos, right? Still winning mid-20s games, single-digit losses. but Gonzaga has really leveled up to be a more consistent second weekend threat, have made the Final Four, have qualified for a couple national championship games as well. And that's a big reason why I think Kevin Pangos is a guy that's really underrated. Let's keep it in the mid-major ranks. A guy that I'm excited to talk about here, a name that I hope you know, Nate Wolters. I sent my lineup of guys to Jacob and to Wilson, and the text that I got from Bigelow, Nate Wolters is an all-caps elite pick. That always makes me feel pretty good about myself when a fellow ball knower says that my pick was elite. But let's just talk through Nate Wolters here for a second. St. Cloud, Minnesota guy, ended up being a second-round pick by the Washington Wizards. 18.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, over 5 assists for his career per game, 45, 34, and 80% splits. Summit Player of the Year, 2012-13, three-time All-Summit League team, All-Summit Tourney team, two-time Summit League tournament player of the tournament, MVP essentially, and then Summit League All-Freshman team. Nate Wolters got to campus, carved out a little bit of a role for himself, played in 29 games for the Jacks in 2009, 2010, only started 11 of those games. But in those 29 games, he averaged over 10 points per game, shot it at 36% from three. His three-point shooting numbers were kind of torpedoed by really just his junior year. I mean, you see a guy here that shot 41% on 3 attempts a game and 38% on over 5 attempts per game, but only shooting 24% as a junior really takes a toll on his overall three-point shooting numbers. I mean, I remember the guy as a sniper, as a bucket. You see this, leading the conference, the Summit League, in assists, just shy of 6 in back-to-back years, while also putting up 20 points per game. That's pretty incredible. So why is it that I think Nate Wolters is under-discussed and maybe underrated? Because you can argue two guys in recent South Dakota State history have passed him up in the record books. One of them would be Nebraska native Mike Daum, and the other would be Nebraska native Baylor Shireman. These South Dakota State teams, let me just take a look at them so I get my facts straight. Lost in a 4-13 matchup to Michigan in Wolters' senior year. Year before that, lost in a 3-14 in a tight game against Baylor. Year before that, didn't qualify for the tournament, and then as a freshman, United Tournament team as well. So you see the impact that Nate Wolters had on winning. By the time he really took over that team as a junior and a senior, this team was rolling. No other, NBA guys on the roster as a junior. It was just Nate Wolters. Some of the other names here: Griffin Callahan, Jordan Dykstra, Chad White, Braden Carlson. Can't tell you I've ever heard of those guys before in my life. But you see, Nate Wolters putting these teams on his back, being the do-it-all guy, one of only 2 guys on the team his senior year to average more than 2 assists per game, only guy over 20 points, one of 3 in double figures. And sure, it's a mid-major conference where one guy can make maybe more of an outsized impact. But you think about the numbers that Mike Daum put up. Let's just go ahead and pull up Mike Daum's numbers as well. Daum came a handful of years after Wolters was off campus. Mike Daum, 3-time Summit League Player of the Year, All Summit League every year, all 4 years, right? Summit League Rookie of the Year, All Freshman Team, 3-time All Summit Tournament, 3-time Summit League Tournament MVP. That's a guy that went 50, 40, 85 as a forward out of little old Kimball, Nebraska. I think there's a lot of deference paid to Mike Daum, and deservedly so. And then Baylor Shireman, right? I think that's the guard comp for him. Of course, Shireman was at South Dakota State for just the first 3 years of his career, where he averaged 6, 15, and 16 points per game, an effective field goal percentage for Shireman of 62%. And of course, Shireman went on to an NBA career. Wolters did get drafted, not quite as high as Shireman, who was, of course, the final pick of the first round, now 2 NBA drafts ago. But I think we, as Nebraskans, right, listening to this podcast, oh yeah, I remember Mike Daum. Oh yeah, I remember Baylor Shireman. They went to South Dakota State. They tore it up, which is absolutely true. But let's not forget Nate Wolters paving the way for both of those guys to have that success up there. Speaking of paving the way for success, mid-major teams, I told you this team was going to come up again. Wichita State and my guy, Clee Anthony, early. was only at Wichita State for 2 years. Transferred in, just played there his junior and senior years. But those 2012, 13, and 13-14 Wichita State teams were special. Cleanthony Early was a guy that got drafted in the second round by the New York Knicks. That's a 6'8" forward who's going 47, 35, 82 for his career at Wichita State, 15-6 on a per-game basis. Consensus All-American, All-Missouri Valley Tournament team, 2-time All-Missouri Valley performer. And those Wichita State teams in 2012-13 were legendary. Cleanthony Early gets there, and the first year he's there, they go 30-9. Finished second in the Mo Valley that year. As we pull up those standings in 2012-13, of course, it would have been Creighton beating Wichita State. It was 13-5 in the regular season in terms of the conference for Creighton. Wichita State ends up going 12-6. Northern Iowa just a game back of that, 11-7, and Evansville then at 10-8. But that 2012-13 Wichita State team was the one that kind of shocked the world. They were the 9 seed in the West. The beat Pitt, that knocked off West number 1 Gonzaga, that got a matchup with LaSalle in the Sweet 16 out there in the West region, took down Ohio State in a nail-biter, and then took number 1 seed Louisville to the brink in the Final Four. That Wichita State team, Cleanthony Early was the leading scorer, right? 13.9 points per game, 5.4 rebounds per game. Malcolm Armstead, probably also under-discussed, a double-digit scorer, and Carl Hall as well. But the guys that get more of the headlines were Fred VanVleet and Ron Baker, right? Fred VanVleet for what he would go on to do in the NBA career, and then Ron Baker as well, right? Getting drafted. But I just feel like Ron Baker and Fred VanVleet got more of the credit for these teams, even Greg Marshall, than Cleanthony Early did, because you turn the page to 2013-14, that team that was a 9 seed comes back pretty much in the same form, right? Cleanthony Early is there. Baker and VanVleet as sophomores both make the leap to averaging double-digit points per game. To Kelly Cotton, Darius Carter, other names on that team. But that 13-14 Wichita State team, I got to pull this up because I hope you remember. They play 36 games. They only lose one of them. And that one loss came to probably a wildly underseeded Kentucky team that got a number 8 seed. You see here, they double up 16 seed Cal Poly. Wichita State does, like double up 16 seed. Yeah, Wichita State out of the Missouri Valley Conference got a 1 seed by virtue of going 18-0 in Missouri Valley Conference play, 17-0 outside of that. That was the number 9 defense in terms of points per game in the country, allowing only 59.5 points per game. But again, you look at this right here, really only one close game, a 3-point win over Missouri State. Sure, maybe a 5-point win over Alabama. That was close, but again, a high major. You see a 5-point win over a fun St. Louis team that year. But look at the size of these green bars. That's huge. This is a team that wasn't just winning. It was winning in dominant fashion. Let's pull up their schedule just to see. Again, we mentioned that win over Alabama for that Wichita State team. But you see a win on the road at Tulsa. You see a Big East win over DePaul. They beat BYU. St. Louis, Bob, they beat Tennessee by 9. They beat Davidson, who'd been in the news for a while before that, 81-70. And then they steamroll through Missouri Valley Conference play before they again run into that Kentucky team. In case you forget, that 2013-14 Kentucky team knock off Kansas State in an ugly game, beat Wichita State, beat Louisville in a bluegrass rivalry battle, beat Michigan close, beat Wisconsin close, and then lose to Shabazz Napier in UConn in that championship game. But if you look at what this Kentucky team had to go through in terms of the schedule, I mean, look at this. Michigan State, they lose close. They get some karmic revenge on Robert Morris. They beat Providence, lose a tight one to Baylor, beat Boise State, lose a tight one on the road at North Carolina, beat Louisville in the regular season, go through the meat grinder that is SEC tournament, not SEC tournament, SEC regular season play, hang tight with Florida in a close loss at home, end up falling to Florida again then in the SEC tournament. But that Kentucky team was absolutely loaded when you think about it. Julius Randle, James Young, the Harrison twins, Willie Cauley-Stein, Alex Poitras, Dakari Johnson. Those are just the guys that went on to the NBA. Marcus Lee would play a role, and other names on and on down the list. But again, when I think about that Wichita State team, and I think when others think about that Wichita State team, you go to Baker and Van Vliet in the backcourt. You go to Greg Marshall as the head coach before you get to Clay Anthony Early. And honestly, I think that's a shame. Dude was a baller in college, and I would say maybe the heartbeat of those Wichita State teams looking in from the outside. I know we've gone kind of long on my team here. I mean, we're almost at 20 minutes, and I've just been rambling about my team with still a couple players to get to. So I will get through the rest of my starters. I'll give you my bench, and then I'll give you the teams for Jacob and for Wilson as well coming up in the next segments. Next player for me, properly rated at the time, but I think we've skipped past him now. Maybe because of team success, but that's Derek Williams. Maybe brushed over because he went second overall in the 2011 draft and then busted in the NBA. Wasn't anything about it, but he spent 2 years at Arizona. And look at this. Pac-12 Player of the Year, NCAA All-Region, Consensus All-American, two-time All-Pac-12, Pac-12 All-Freshman, Rookie of the Year, all that good stuff. 18-7-1 on 59, 50, 72 as a big guy. This was a proto stretch four, not high three-point volume necessarily, but really knocked him down. And that's what made him so dangerous as a matchup nightmare for those Arizona teams. I think Derek Williams is known for being part of that Arizona team that took down Duke as they were on their way to repeat. But then there's a bunch of guys, I think, from Arizona that have overshadowed Derek Williams, who he was, and what he did as a member of the Wildcats. I mean, let's just go through some of the other guys on that team with him. You think about Solomon Hill, who ended up being a pretty long-time NBA player. This is, of course, under Sean Miller before everything went down for Sean Miller, right? Derek Williams then leaves Arizona, and they win 27 games. They make it to the Sweet 16, being led by Nick Johnson. You also see Mark Lyons was a guy that popped up. There's another guy we probably need to talk about at some point. And I think Derek Williams is overshadowed too, just because of the legacy and the nature of Sean Miller versus Wisconsin. Lost by 1 point there in the Elite Eight, with the chance to go to the Final Four as a 1 seed in the West. A really incredible game that they got upset by. But you see Aaron Gordon burst onto the scene, Caleb Kardusky on the scene, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson is a guy that we'll talk about. TJ McConnell certainly got some headlines for his time at Arizona. And then Sean Miller really ramped up the talent acquisition, right? Stanley Johnson, incredible basketball player. You think about the other guys then that have passed through Arizona. Alonzo Trier, a guy that is a freshman, really tore it up for Arizona. I mean, that's 15-3-1 as a freshman out of Seattle. Alonzo Trier was a baller at Arizona, right? Larry Markkinen comes in. Raul Akins comes in. Kobe Simmons comes in. And I think have really just overshadowed what we remember about Derek Williams. Obviously, DeAndre Ayton as well in that mix. I forgot Alonzo Trier stuck around Arizona. I honestly forgot that. Certainly leveled up. But yeah, Derek Williams was a stud in college. I don't like him for it, but I think he's kind of gone under the radar. And to that point, that's where I'll wrap up my starting lineup with Vernon Carey Jr. When you think of one and done Duke players, it takes a while for you to get to Vernon Carey Jr. I mean, even if you just think about the post guys, not even the one and dones, but you think about recently what Paulo Banchero did. You think about what Mark Williams did, Kyle Filipowski, Cooper Flagg in that mix. You even think about the wings, right? Tatum, Parker, Ingram, all sorts of guys like that. Some of the guards come into play in that conversation as well. I mean, Matt Hurt on the post as well. But consensus All-American, ACC Rookie of the Year, All-Freshman team, All-ACC. I would have made the argument that the Vernon Carey Jr. should have been the ACC Player of the Year that year. 18, 9, and 1 on 58, 38, 67 at 6'10", 270. Vernon Carey was dominant. That's a guy that Duke was able to flip from Michigan State pretty late in the recruiting process. Now, only played 25 minutes a game, wasn't in the best shape, but those minutes were off the charts efficient, especially for a big guy in everything that was asked of him. But I also think Vernon Carey was overshadowed because when you think about these Duke big men that go first round, that have these dominant type seasons, you think about title-winning Jahlil Okafor. You think about Marvin Bagley, right? How he took the ACC by storm just a couple years before Vernon Carey Jr. got there. You think about right before Tank, as they called him, you think about Zion Williamson being on that team, right? Vernon Carey was the most understated, the most under the radar, I think, of any of those guys, and didn't have better numbers than Bagley. Probably wasn't as consistent. I would take Bagley's college career, the 1 year, I would say, over Vernon Carey. Okafor won a title. Zion was Zion. And that's the legacy of the limelight that Vernon Carey Jr. had to step in on. And he really thrived in it for a Duke team that I think also goes under the radar. 25-6, 15-5 in the ACC. Of course, that's a team that didn't get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament that was canceled because of COVID. But the conversation around that 2019-20 season is that the Final Four was looking like Kansas was probably going to be the best team in the country. That was, there's no stopping Obi Toppin, and Dayton might have been one of the best San Diego State teams of all time in 2019-20 as well. And a Duke team that, lost some games, certainly because of the defense. But you look at this, number 2 offense in terms of points per game in the country, averaging 83 points per game. And even if you go up and down this roster, yeah, Vernon Carey was probably the headliner in terms of statistics, but Trey Jones came back for his sophomore year. He was part of that recruiting class with Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, Cam Reddish. You look at Cash Stanley coming in alongside Vernon Carey as a freshman. Cassius Stanley, the high flyer, some of the best in-game dunks you'll ever see. Go look up his highlight tape. You think about Matthew Hurt as the stretch 4 playing alongside Vernon Carey, and that explains a lot of the defensive issues right there. Wendell Moore as a freshman came in with a lot of promise, didn't necessarily live up to it until his junior year. You get spot minutes from Alex O'Connell, Jordan Goldwire helping run the team, sophomore Joey Baker as well. And then the upperclassmen in Javin DeLaurier and Jack White in the front court alongside Justin Robinson. Yeah, that Duke team lost some games. They were number 1 in the country before they got upset by Stephen F. Austin. Lost to Clemson, pretty solid Clemson team. Lost to Louisville, who was pretty decent at that point under, I think it was Chris Mack. The weird loss to North Carolina State in Raleigh. Okay, just kind of chalk that one up to that happens. Double overtime game against Wake Forest where Duke had 4 or 5 players foul out. They give up 113 points, and then a tight loss to Virginia on the road. Then Duke beats NC State. They wrap up the regular season with, I think that was the Justin Robinson game against North Carolina. Vernon Carey just had so much to live up to with the other posts that came before him. And there's a lot of hype around Trey Jones, right? Coming back for his sophomore year, the leap that he took, averaging 16, 4, and 6 per game. Cash Stanley, I think, stole some headlines being the high flyer. But man, let's not sleep on what Vernon Carey Jr. was able to do for his 1 year in Durham. All right, let's take a break. A couple other guys I want to mention for my bench. We'll get to Jacob and Wilson's teams. All that still ahead here on the Corner 3.
MHC isn't new, just a new name. Moe's Moving is now Moe's Home and Commercial. Whether moving across town or across the state, MHC Moving has you covered. Specializing in home, apartment, assisted, and independent living moves. MHC can also handle your commercial moves as well. There's never fees on trucks, stairs, elevators, long carry, and last minute booking, and no trip or fuel charges. Also no upcharge on weekends, and they do offer payment plans through PayPal. Call MHC Moving today at 402-853-7167 or go to mhcmoving.com.
A lot of businesses say they're family focused, but when tough situations in life arise, the business wants anything but your best interests. James Enterprise Incorporated is hiring, and they will always treat their employees like family, just as they do their customers. James Enterprise Incorporated is hiring Class A and B CDL drivers, a shop tech, and a diesel mechanic. If you're looking for a career with a company that goes above and beyond to value you and your family, apply today at jamesenterpriseinc.com or call 402-432-6740.
We interrupt this commercial break for an important story.
There once was a man from Nebraska who went searching for food in Alaska. When his stomach was rumbling while laying in bed, he could think of only one option, Führer's cheese spread. So he left it once and drove day and night to return back home for cheese spread delight. Now his stomach is full and the voice in his head tells him no more vacations without Führer's cheese spread. Find yours today at most local grocers.
Rosie's Sports Bar and Grill, open for lunch and dinner at 1501 Center Park Road, just south of 14th and Highway 2. Attention all Wings fans, Buffalo Wings and Rings has daily specials that will make you want to stop in on all days of the week. Kids eat free on Mondays, and on Tuesdays enjoy 40% off boneless or traditional wings at a price that makes the whole family happy. And come back on Wednesdays for $1.39 chicken tenders all day long. Get to Wings and Rings today, 68th and O or in Williamsburg Village.
Life changes, and sometimes that means changing where you call home. Whether you're downsizing, growing a family, relocating, or facing tough times, you shouldn't navigate it alone. I'm Laura Bonta-Bush with Woods Bros Realty, and I'm here to guide you with all your real estate needs. As wife of football coach Bill Bush, I understand the importance of teamwork and making sure you are supported every step of the way with honesty, integrity, and compassion. If you're looking for a game plan to buy or sell your home, text or call me at 402-525-0843. That's 402-525-0843.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Orman.
All right, second segment here of the Corner 3 podcast. Jumping right back into it. I got two guys to talk about on my bench, Coach Austin Orman, if you will. For the guys we don't talk about enough, the guys that are maybe criminally underrated or under-discussed, before we get into teams from Jacob Bigelow and Wilson Moore. All right, on my bench, first player, Frank Jackson of Duke. Let me pop my screen share back up. Didn't want to give the game away, but here we go. So Frank Jackson of Duke, Utah guy that made the trip out from Alpine, Utah, Lone Peak High School to Durham. One and done, top 100, recruit number 14 in that 2016 class. Numbers are pretty modest. 11 points, 2.5 rebounds, assists and a half per game. But here's the part, 40% three-point shooter on relatively low volume for this Duke team. The reason I think that Frank Jackson goes a little bit under the radar when you think about Duke guys is, who he came after and, of course, who he played with. A lot of stuff I remember about Frank Jackson. The two things I think that stand out most to me are the game against Kansas. Frank Jackson hit a little jump shot to put Duke ahead, but then 7 seconds later, it was one-upped by Frank Mason in the Champions Classic. Remember watching that game with my buddy who's a big Kansas fan and a friend of mine whose wedding I was just at a few weeks ago. Remember being in the Abel Sandos, one of the conference rooms in there, watching that game with them. And did have to share the rap song about Frank Mason with Biggs and Willie. There's a rap song, about Frank Mason. And I turned Frank Mason into Frank Jackson 7 seconds too early. So I was eating some big time crow about that one. And then I do also remember Frank Jackson coming up pretty big against North Carolina in the ACC tournament. I'm going to try to get his numbers pulled up from that game. I do remember him hitting a pretty big three in that game because that's a game that Carolina led at the half, kept Duke kind of at arm's distance, but then Duke made a comeback there in the second half. Yeah, it was a 7-point Tar Heel advantage there in the first half. I think Duke went from down 10 to up 10. There's a 20-point swing there in the second half. And I seem to recall a Frank Jackson layup from the left side and a three from the left wing as well. Yeah, 2 of 5 from long range for Frank Jackson in that one. He was the fourth leading scorer in that game for the Blue Devils. But again, you look at some of these names that Frank Jackson was playing alongside. This was the Jason Tatum year. After Tatum started the year banged up, he really turned it on, would go top 5 in the NBA draft, of course, to the Boston Celtics. Think about Luke Kennard coming back for another year in Durham. He was the headliner, one of the studs on that team, sniper, did a lot of ball handling and scoring as well. You think about an upperclassman in Emil Jefferson, who's a winning player. Matt Jones won a title with Duke a couple years earlier. And then you even go down the list. Grayson Allen. This would have been Grayson Allen's senior year, right? He was a big deal. Suspensions, tantrums, and all. This was Grayson Allen's team, maybe alongside Luke Kennard. But then you had the stud freshman from St. Louis and Jason Tatum. And then we forget Harry Giles was the highest rated recruit of any of these guys. Harry Giles. That's a name you might not necessarily remember, but high school Harry Giles was special, was different. Let me swap over to this other tab here as we go up and down the roster. Yeah, Jason Tatum was the number 3 guy in the 2016 class. Harry Giles was number 1 for a long time, but ended up at number 2. Like, well, what are those numbers? That's nothing. That's 4 and 4 a game. Harry Giles had ACL injuries to both knees. This was a ball handling, outside shooting, traditional post game with some rim protection big man. Harry Giles was supposed to be the future, but the knee injuries just sapped so much from H. Jizzle. Another guy that I think we'll look back on and talk about as a big what if, a what could have been. But that was the competition for Frank Jackson, who ties Duke for 4th in scoring with, again, sophomore Luke Kennard, who took a huge jump. Junior Grayson Allen, sorry, not senior. This was his junior year, 14 points a game after his breakout as a sophomore. Freshman Jason Tatum coming back into the lineup. Senior in Emile Jefferson. Senior in Matt Jones. Stud freshman in Harry Giles. And then 3 other guys down the roster that would end up playing in the NBA. Frank Jackson was so fun, man. Frank Jackson, I wish he would have stuck around another year. He ended up getting drafted, I believe it was in the second round. I think he was the first pick of the second round by the Hornets. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So long live Frank Jackson. The other guy on my bench here, Hashim Thabit. Really fun name. Guy out of, I believe, Tanzania. Yeah. Probably more known for being a bust in the NBA. But, I mean, averaged darn near a double-double in a few years at UConn. Consensus All-American, 2-time All-Big East guy, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, overall Player of the Year in 2008-2009. But look at this. Starts all but one game that he plays at UConn in 3 years. The fewest blocks per game he averaged was 3.8. Then 4.5 and 4.2 as he wins Big East Player of the Year here his junior year. Back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year in those 2 seasons, a sophomore and junior year. We don't talk about Hashim Thabit enough because he was following in some big footsteps from Emeka Okafor. You also think about Hashim Thabit being in between titles for UConn, right? He was between the 2004 and 2011 title teams, and of course 2014 down the line as well. And looking at that team that Hashim Thabit played on his senior year, that's a Final Four team that couldn't quite break through. They ended up losing to Michigan State in the Final Four with a chance to go to the national championship. But A.J. Price, Jeff Adrian, freshman Kemba was on that team. Jerome Dyson, that's not a guy I remember hearing really anything about. But these were good UConn teams that ended up pretty forgettable because of the titles that pretty much sandwiched them. Because Hashim Thabit was probably the headliner on these teams, but wasn't the gaudy point scorer, right? He was the defensive backbone of these teams. They were good UConn teams that were solid UConn teams that I think just get overshadowed by who came just before and just after them. All right. That's Team Austin Norman. Let me see if I can zoom in and share this tab to not give you too much of a preview of what's to come. I'm just going to say skip it. Kevin Pangos, Nate Wolters, Cle Anthony Early, Derek Williams, and Vernon Carey. That's my all underrated, all under-discussed team. And then I'll have Frank Jackson and Hashim Thabit coming in off my bench. All right. Team Jacob Bigelow. His point guard, Grievous Vasquez. That's a 6'6" lead guard at Maryland. Consensus All-American, 3-time All-ACC player, ACC Player of the Year in 2009, 2010. Look at that, 16, 5, and 6 for his career. Not the best outside shooter, but a pretty good three-point shooter. I didn't ask for explanation or discussion from Jacob and Wilson on their picks, so I'm just going to kind of fill in with some of my thoughts. Grievous Vasquez, a little overshadowed, I think, because he came just a handful of years after that 2002 title team with Juan Dixon and Steve Blake. I think a lack of postseason success is why we maybe underrate and forget Grievous Vasquez, because made the tournament twice, second round exit twice, round of 32. Again, right after a title and right before a huge infusion of talent to some of these Maryland teams. As we scroll in after Grievous Vasquez leaves, right? That's when you start getting into the late ACC early Big Ten era for Maryland. A guy like Alex Len walks through the door, dominant in college. Probably don't talk enough about him. Jake Layman comes through the door a couple years later. You really start thinking about here coming up in that 2014-15 range. You get Mello Trimble in the door. You get DeMonte Dodd is a name people might remember. You think about Diamond Stone. You think about Kevin Herter. Robert Carter had a pretty good year for them as well. Grievous Vasquez was a baller, right? Kind of Sean Livingston, Tyrese Halliburton-ish before those guys really burst on the scene. Yeah, Rashid Suleiman, there's my guy that transferred in from Duke. Grievous Vasquez was fun. Grievous Vasquez was good, but didn't have the postseason success to show for it. Russ Smith from Louisville is on Jacob's list, and I disagree with this one. I think Russ Smith gets a lot of the credit for helping Louisville win the title, alongside, of course, Peyton Siva, but maybe slightly overshadowed by Rick Pitino. Jacob throws Chris Dunn on his list. I got to look up Chris Dunn's numbers at Providence. That was a 4-year guy, I believe, out there at PC. Yeah. Injured in 2013-14, then came back and started 65 of a possible 66 games. Menace defensively. Look at this. 2.7 and 2.5 steals his final years. Averaged over 15 points both years, over 5 assists and 4 rebounds per game as well. 2-time Big East Player of the Year as a junior and a senior. Consensus All-American, and as a guard was the Big East Defensive Player of the Year. Came to Providence as a top 20 recruit, has carved out an NBA career. Wasn't exactly a bust, but did have a little bit of issue translating to the NBA game, but the defensive ability certainly has translated for a number of teams across his time in the NBA. Yeah, Chris Dunn in college was balling for Providence. Let me remember how those teams did in the postseason. Upset in the first round by Dayton in Chris Dunn's junior year, and then as the 9 seed lost to North Carolina in 15-16. So not a huge amount of postseason success, but Chris Dunn, a fantastic individual player there for the Friars. Here's a fun one, friends. This, I think, more than makes up for the Russ Smith pick from Biggs. Luke Herringody. Luke Herringody. How about that? I did not know that Luke Herringody was a 3-time consensus All-American. 3-time consensus All-American. I knew he was all Big East. I knew he was good. I knew he won a random Big East Player of the Year. But 19, 10, and 2 for his career as a pretty traditional power forward. Not a great shooter from long range, but could stretch the floor a little bit. Luke Herringody is a name that we forget as a 3-time consensus All-American. Second team as a junior and a senior. But that's a guy that averaged 20 or more points 3 straight years. Overshadowed, though, because Notre Dame ended up leveling up, taking a step forward under Mike Bray, 7-8 years later. You see, they got a 5 seed his sophomore year, ended up losing to, how about this, 4th seeded Washington State in the East. That's pretty hilarious to think about. 2008, 2009, no postseason for them. And then 2009, 2010, upset in the first round in a 6-11 matchup versus Old Dominion. But man, Luke Herringody, that is a name I had not thought of in a long, long time. Probably overshadowed as well by Bonzi Colson would do, what Jerian Grant would do for Notre Dame in the near future, overshadowed maybe by a name like Jack Cooley. I'm trying to think of some of those other guys that were on that Notre Dame team later on in 2017. But yeah, how about Luke Herringody, 3-time consensus All-American. Then a guy that I think was properly rated at the time, but maybe flies under the radar now. Thomas Robinson from Kansas is on Biggs' list. That's your 2011-12 Big 12 Player of the Year, consensus All-American, who took 3 years to live up to his promise, right? You look at his career numbers here, under double digits per game scoring, 7 rebounds per game, that's fine. 53% essentially for his career shooting the ball. But think about who Thomas Robinson was behind those 2009, 2010 teams for Kansas, right? Coming off that 2008 title over Memphis, right? Let's just scroll back through these Kansas teams in 2009, 2010. Thomas Robinson plays, but he's behind Sharon Collins. Oh, shoot. Let me share this tab instead. This is important. Behind Sharon Collins is a senior. Xavier Henry, stud one and done. Morris twins come to campus. Cole Aldrich, his junior and senior years were Thomas Robinson's freshman and sophomore years as well. You know, that is a bunch of talent for Thomas Robinson to be, quote unquote, buried behind, right? Even think about a guy like Jeff Withy, who was a freshman in the same class as Thomas Robinson, rated just one spot apart from each other in different years. Then you go to the next year, right? 2010, 2011, sophomore year for Thomas Robinson. Kansas gets beat by VCU in the Elite Eight. So VCU goes to the Final Four. Thomas Robinson, again, maybe a little bit buried behind the Morris twins, who were balling in the front court. Tyrell Reed as a guard. Tyshawn Taylor came to campus, averaged 9 points and 5 assists per game as well. But then when it was Thomas Robinson time, it was Thomas Robinson time. Helped carry that team to the Big Ten regular season championship and all the way to the national championship game, where they did, face some underseeded teams. They got 10th seeded Purdue instead of the 7th seed. They got 11th seeded NC State instead of maybe the 2 or the 3 seed. Beat North Carolina, beat Ohio State then in the Final Four before ultimately falling to Kentucky. But think about, Thomas Robinson, 17 and 12, almost 18 and 12 there as a junior. Senior Tyshawn Taylor averaging 16 points a game. Jeff Withy in the front court playing center alongside Thomas Robinson at power forward. Get a random Travis Relaford name in there. Connor Tien might ring a bell for some people as well. But man, it took 3 years for Thomas Robinson to grow and blossom into the role that he needed out of high school. But when he got there, oh boy, he arrived in a big, big way. All right, let's go back to the teams here. So far for me, it's Kevin Pangos, Nate Wolters, Cleanthony Early, Derek Williams, and Vernon Carey. Then for Jacob Bigelow, it's Grievous Vasquez, Russ Smith, Chris Dunn, and then 2 fantastic picks in Luke Herringody and Thomas Robinson. We'll take our final break of the show. When we get back, we'll bring you Team Wilson Moore. This was a fun one to go through as well. We'll give you the final team for the Remember Him in College Basketball when we get back to the Corner 3.
Big box stores are tempting for buying equipment for your high schooler in sports or for yourself in your sports leisures. But buying new is awfully expensive. Why not go somewhere with new and used options? Play It Again Sports has quality, slightly to gently used equipment, and 50% of their inventory is actually new equipment. And it's more than baseball, softball, and golf. They also have equipment for disc golf, fitness, hockey, and more. Plus, they're always buying products. Bring your gear you're done with and get trade money on the spot. Play It Again Sports at 48th and Vine.
Have you been injured in an accident and don't know where to turn? You need an attorney you can trust to handle your case with professionalism and compassion. The attorneys at Liberty Law Group understand that a call to an attorney is a call for help. If you've been injured, we want to help you. Liberty Law's experienced attorneys are committed to the pursuit of justice for those injured. Call Liberty Law and find out how we can help you get the compensation you deserve. Call 877-42-LIBERTY. Call the trial attorneys you can trust. 877-42-LIBERTY.
Make bill paying a breeze with Text to Pay. LDS texts you 1 week before your bill's due date. Just reply to the text to pay. It's that easy. Log into your account at les.com to sign up today.
Saturday. Eagle Raceway is open for a full season of dirt track racing action every Saturday night. Don't miss the epic battles on the high banks of Eagle Raceway each Saturday between the Nebraska Septic Sprint Cars, Nebraska Lottery Modifieds, Avid Realty Sport Mods, Valentino's Hobby Stocks, and A1 Iron Stock Cars. Let's go racing. Eagle Raceway, just 10 miles east of Lincoln on O Street. Check out the full schedule at eagleraceway.com.
This is James Harrell with NP Dodge Real Estate. When I became a licensed realtor, I wanted a brokerage that would help me grow in my new career. I found that in Lincoln First Realty. When Lincoln First was acquired by NP Dodge, the training and support I received only got better. I love knowing I have the power of the NP Dodge brand behind me. I would recommend NP Dodge to new agents looking to jumpstart their real estate career and to current agents who want to take their business to the next level.
Expand your career with NP Dodge. Call Eric at 402-434-2222.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Orman.
All right, back one final time here for the Corner 3 going down memory lane. Been a fun exercise. We're through Team AO. We're through Team JB. Now it's time for Team WM. I am your host, Austin Orman. Put together the first team of Remember Him guys. Heard from Jacob Bigelow's team as well. Now it's time for Team Wilson Moore. Let's start by getting the screen sharing back up for you so you can see who it is that we're talking about. First player that Wilson Moore went to, Kalen Lucas, out of Michigan State. That's a home state kid out of Detroit, top 40 recruit in his class. Winner. That's what the dude did. Sweet 16, national championship appearance, Final Four, and then another NCAA tournament berth where they lost in the round of 64. Kalen Lucas is not a name I remembered at all. Already give props to Wilson for this one. Did not realize he was an all-tournament team player in the NCAA tournament. Big Ten Player of the Year. Completely forgot that he balled out in 2008, 2009. Two-time All-Big Ten guy and All-Big Ten tournament team his final year. I mean, you look at his numbers, don't exactly jump off the page at you. I mean, 14.5 points per game, 4 assists per game. That's good. That's good. Don't get me wrong, but not like you don't see much, bold on his page outside of this, where he ended up playing the most games in the conference. But that's it. I mean, 17 points as a senior is pretty good when he was asked to shoulder a lot more of a load. I mean, shooting 39% from three on the highest volume of his career as well as a senior. But why is Kalen Lucas forgotten? Why is he overshadowed? Well, let's go through who else he ended up playing with, right? He was, probably the biggest name, the only NBA guy on that team that made the Sweet 16 his freshman year. Let's actually allow you to see what it is I'm looking at here as well. That team that ended up going to the final, you don't really remember the loser, right? You remember that 2009 Carolina team for how dominant it was. You don't remember that Michigan State had to take down 2 number 1 seeds just to get to another number 1 seed as a number 2 seed themselves there in the Midwest region. This is not a cakewalk of a run to the national championship game from Michigan State. A really good Louisville team, really good UConn team against Hashim Thabit, right? Just mentioned him. And then that loaded Carolina team that won it all in 2009. You see that, Kalen Lucas, leading scorer on that team, one of only 3 guys in double digits. But you see this name down here, Draymond Green. Then you get the name right below it, Corey Lucius, guys that would end up playing huge roles in some Michigan State lore later on down the line. 2009, 2010, Michigan State makes it back to the Final Four where they lose to Butler. Derek Nix is a name I just saw pop up. That's an interesting one. And then the final year, that's really where it became Draymond Green's team, right? That's where Draymond Green really burst onto the scene. 13 points and 9 rebounds per game. Essentially, you get Adrian Payne coming to campus. Keith Appling, there's another name I'm sure people know if they're plugged into the Big Ten or Michigan State as well. I think Kalen Lucas not winning the national championship maybe holds him back, but in a lot of ways, who was Kalen Lucas, if not proto Cash Winston? Here's what Kalen Lucas did, right? Big Ten Player of the Year, 2-time All Big Ten on 14, 2, and 4. But then you go to Cassius Winston. This would have been about 5 years later. Cash Winston, 2-time consensus All-American, also 2-time All Big Ten, 1-time Big Ten Player of the Year, Big Ten Tournament MVP as well. But Cash Winston, same scoring, a little more rebounding. Oh, let me switch the page here. And more assists per game. Better three-point shooter than Kalen Lucas by percentage as well. And Cash Winston helped impact a lot of winning for Michigan State. Led the Big Ten in assists per game. Back-to-back years, 7.5 and 6. Playing every game, still putting up numbers, scoring the ball. shooting the cover off of it as well. I mean, 38% was the worst that Cash Winston shot from three. That's pretty incredible. Now, if you look at the team success for Cassius Winston, second round, as opposed to Sweet 16 for Kalen Lucas as a freshman. Second round, again, instead of Final Four national championship appearance. Did make the Final Four in 2018-19, where they lost to Texas Tech. So they're even in losing in the Final Four as juniors. Then as a senior, of course, Cash Winston ended up having the NCAA tournament canceled for him. But that's regular season championship for Michigan State, regular season and tournament championship for Michigan State for Cash Winston, regular season champ in 2017-18 as well, compared to Kalen Lucas's teams, which let me pull those back up again because I wasn't looking that closely. Cash Winston went 3 for 4, winning the regular season crown. Kalen Lucas's Michigan State won it in his sophomore year, junior year, and then took a step back. So I think Kalen Lucas really helped set the stage for what Denzel Valentine and eventually Cassius Winston would be there at Michigan State. Marcus Page, I'm not going to give you his stats, don't care enough to look him up. I really think, though, that Marcus Page from North Carolina is overshadowed because in 2016, he was the one that got Chris Jenkins. It was Marcus Page that hit that circus shot from the right wing in front of Carolina's bench that then got overshadowed, just a few seconds later by Chris Jenkins giving Nova its first title since 1985. I also think when you think about Marcus Page, he's overshadowed by that team next year for North Carolina that ended up winning the title, overshadowed by Luke May, maybe by Joel Berry, who's on TV for the ACC network now, Justin Jackson as well. Marcus Page was a good player, pain in the butt, elite three-point shooter, but I think overshadowed by some teams that came just before his time, and of course the next year winning a title without him. How about this for a name, though, from Wilson Moore? How about Ryan Boatwright? Ryan Boatwright, a product, of course, of UConn, two-time national champion. Won one with Kemba and won one with Shabazz. Ryan Boatwright, out of Illinois, 14 points for 3.5 per game then, but 38% three-point shooter. Kind of proto-Caravan, except he was more of a guard, not a wing. Boatwright only a 6-footer, but sharing a backcourt at times with Kemba Walker as a freshman, certainly sharing the backcourt with Shabazz Napier there in 2014 when UConn ends up winning the title. It's just kind of funny to think about Ryan Boatwright being the guy that really helped UConn, who was known for those small guards, but he was always second fiddle. First of all, behind Kemba, and then, of course, behind Shabazz Napier. You look at this, right? One-time all-conference player, one-time all-tournament team, all-tourney in the NCAA as well. It wasn't about the numbers for Ryan Boatwright, but that was a perfect sort of role player for UConn that I think gets overshadowed by those two lead guards and by their more recent success, right? With other guys that you've seen play off the ball and play the Ryan Boatwright role really, really effectively for Dan Hurley in his back-to-back national title runs. How about Trez Harrell for Team Willie Moore? Montrez Harrell. Played 3 years at Louisville, won the championship right on that Russ Smith, Peyton Siva team where he was a freshman. The accomplishments for Trez Harrell are up there, right? All American Conference player in back-to-back years, all tournament team, and then most improved player as well in his sophomore year. Trez Harrell was probably the heartbeat of those teams when you look at the front court, but he was always going to be overshadowed by Russ Smith and by Peyton Siva. I mean, 40 games he played in 2012-13. Of course, those games get vacated when it is Louisville ends up winning the title over Michigan. Trez Harrell, as a freshman, didn't play a whole bunch. Only ended up averaging about 6 points and 3.5 rebounds per game. Then the next year takes a huge step forward for a team that ends up getting beat in the Sweet 16 by that Kentucky team in 2014. But Trez Harrell goes from 6-4 to being the second leading scorer on that team with 14 and 8.5 points per game behind, of course, Russ Smith. You think about Luke Hancock being on that team. Then the next year, right, for Trez Harrell, he's the upperclassman, but the leading scorer on the team. scary Terry Rozier, who averaged 17 points per game that year. I also think part of maybe the Montrezl Harrell under discussion, I wonder how many people out there would admit to getting Trez Harrell and Kenneth Faried mixed up, right? The Manimal from Morehead State versus Montrezl Harrell from Louisville. Similar size guys, known for their intensity, known for their work on the glass, they being maybe a little undersized for the center position that they ended up playing a lot of the time. Trez Harrell was fun, though. Did not like to see those Duke teams end up facing him. I think they're in the ACC at that point. Or are they still in the American? I still have some memories that what I think of are Duke facing Trez Harrell, but I very well might be having the years run together. But man, you think about Terry Rozier as a sophomore, you think about even Wayne Blackshear as a name that comes up, Mangok Mathiang as a name. Here's a name, though, Husker fans. Anton Gill as a sophomore, future Nebraska transfer at this point. Trez Harrell was good, but not all-American type of good. So I think it's maybe kind of understandable that we overlook him, even though the dude was a beast. All right. Here's the one that I kind of wondered if it was going to come from Wilson because of his upbringing in the state of Minnesota. How about this? Jordan Murphy from Minnesota. Jordan Murphy was a pain in Nebraska's butt. And I think he gets maybe a little overshadowed and overlooked because Minnesota hasn't been great. But also, Jordan Murphy was much more recent than I remember. I mean, look at this. 2018-19, all Big Ten. I would have thought Jordan Murphy was around in like the early mid 2010s, but no, he was a mid to late 2010s guy at Minnesota, and I don't know how I got that mixed up. Jordan Murphy, pretty undersized for that power forward position at 6'6". I mean, the 250 certainly helped him out there, but he was playing a lot of 4, even some 5 for some actually decent Minnesota teams, that you might not remember. I mean, look at this. He steps onto campus, plays over 26 minutes per game, starts 20 games as a freshman, and then starts every game from there on out. He's a record holder in a lot of categories at Minnesota. Double-double machine, 14 and 11 a game as a senior, 17 and 11 as a junior. Dude never really developed the outside shot, as you can see here, but he was brutally efficient inside from 2. He was a high-volume guy on these Minnesota teams, who I believe they ended up making the NCAA tournament twice while Jordan Murphy was there. Yeah, Rich Pitino was there, so Jordan Murphy would have been kind of early, mid Rich Pitino. So yeah, Jordan Murphy's first year there in 15-16 would have been year 3 for Richard Pitino. Makes the NCAA tournament, then Jordan Murphy does as a sophomore. They get upset. They were the 5 seed in 2016-17 after finishing 4th in the Big Ten. They get upset by Middle Tennessee State. In fact, let's look up this Middle Tennessee State team while we're here and see what we remember about him. Kermit Davis was the coach. Okay, that's fun. Conference USA regular season and tournament champs. Tennessee State led by Ja'Cory Williams, Giddy Potts, Reggie Upshaw. Now there's a name. Interesting. Kind of forgot that happened to Minnesota as a 5 seed getting upset by Middle Tennessee State, which happens to Big Ten teams, right? Of course, it was MTSU who ended up taking down Michigan State when the Spartans were a 2 seed with Denzel Valentine. Minnesota goes sub 500 in Jordan Murphy's junior year, and then as a senior, when he's all conference in the Big Ten, they get a 10 seed, beat Louisville before a conference rematch against Michigan State, that really good Michigan State team where they end up losing it by 20. Sub 500 in the Big Ten, but still good for 7th because of just how brutal the conference was that year. And Jordan Murphy didn't always have a lot of help, right? That junior year, sure, Amir Coffey. He was fun. Amir Coffey, another guy maybe underrated in Big Ten annals. Then you look at, right, Daniel Oturu as a freshman coming in. Daniel Oturu maybe underrated as well. Gabe Kalsher, there's a fun name for a guy that could really fill it up. Isaiah Washington, there's a fun name as well. But Jordan Murphy, again, kind of undersized, workman-like Big Ten post guy. Really, really fun player that I was happy when he graduated, right? Jordan Murphy was kind of in that Ethan Happ, that Tyler Cook school. Stephen Crowell, dare I say, Nolan Winter certainly trending that way, of just solid Big Ten big men that you hate it when your teams face. So I'm going to, now that we are at the end of the podcast, I'm going to end up sharing my screen so you can get one final look here at the teams that we ended up putting together. Give me just a sec here as I delete my notes, so you just get a good look at the teams. I will clump them a little bit closer together because this is what I do for you guys. If you're watching the live stream on social media, honestly, truly, I appreciate you guys for listening, for being a part of the Corner 3 community, such as it is. Let me go ahead and finish up my formatting here, and we will share screen, we'll share the tab, and I will zoom in twice for you so you can get a look at the teams. Team me, Team Austin, Kevin Pangos from Gonzaga, Nate Wolters from South Dakota State, Clay Anthony Early from Wichita State, Derek Williams of Arizona, and Vernon Carey from Duke. My two-player bench, Frank Jackson from Duke and Hashim Thabit of UConn. You look at Team Jacob Bigelow, Grievous Vasquez from Maryland, Russ Smith from Louisville, Chris Dunn from Providence, Luke Herringody, your three-time All-American from Notre Dame, and Thomas Robinson, big-time junior year for Kansas in 2011-12. And then Team Wilson Moore, Kalen Lucas from Michigan State, Marcus Page from North Carolina, Ryan Boatwright from UConn, Trez Harrell from Louisville, and Jordan Murphy, who is a Golden Gopher, which is near and dear and warm in Wilson Moore's heart. All right, it's enough of me rambling. Thanks a ton for being along for the ride here. Fun look back at some players that are underrated and or underdiscussed in college basketball history, right? These are three guys here, me, Jacob, and Wilson, that grew up in a very similar time frame. Our college basketball identities, eyes and ears were shaped in a lot of the same ways. It was fun to not get any overlapping names from these guys. We got a chance to talk about 17 different players, and that's fun. Stay on the lookout. We will have the Corner 3 Summer Series continue. We'll start going through our conference previews in terms of the teams and the players that you need to know. All that coming up on the Corner 3, but for now, this is Austin Norman signing off. Next time I talk to you, it'll be from Sin City. Talk to you in Vegas.